All right. Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to another installment of Vantage Ventures Real Talks. My name is Isaac Obiama. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We have an, or I should say this afternoon, we have an awesome guest lined up today in Dr. Brad Price. Brad Price, PhD, is an assistant professor of the Business Data Analytics and the Management Information Systems Department at the College of Business and Economics here at West Virginia University. Got my Let's Go on. His research focuses on the use of data science in business, and specifically in the development of data mining and machine learning methodology, with various applications of these methods across fields such as information technology, marketing, engineering, and social sciences. Price is specifically interested in creating scalable algorithms so that organizations can make the best out of the massive amounts of data that they've collected. So, without further ado, I am going to introduce you all to Dr. Price, ladies and gentlemen. Give you the virtual round of applause. Welcome, welcome.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. How are you today?
Good, good. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time.
I'm really excited to talk to you guys.
Yeah,
Really excited to talk to you guys about the stuff we've been doing.
yeah, absolutely. And so, I think we should just dive into it. We had those tech issues, so I say we just jump right in. Uh,
That works for me.
Yeah. So, what are some of the experiences that you had growing up in West Virginia, that helped you achieve success in, we'll say, one of the hottest areas today, which is data science?
Yeah, so I'm from the southern part of the state, right? So I'm down from I call Madison home, so down in Boone County, and grew up down there. Grandparents both owned small businesses in different areas. One owned a flower shop in Whitesville, West Virginia. I may be the only information systems or tech professor in the country who knows how to wire roses and do stuff like that. But my other set of grandparents owned a hardware store in Southeast Ohio in Gallipolis. So I kind of grew up around small businesses and hardworking, and that you've got to outwork people mentality to kind of stay afloat. And then both my parents kind of instilled that. And I'd say one of the things we've kind of seen that you need to be successful in data science. One of the things I talk to my students about a lot is it's a blue collar field in a white collar world. Like everybody thinks it's an easy field, but where you kind of get your success in data science is your work ethic. Work ethic, excuse me. I do apologize for not being the most articulate person in the world. So it's one of those things where the work ethic comes into play a whole lot in our field, and I think that's something I got from growing up in West Virginia and growing up the way I did. It's one of those mentalities. I never assume I'm the smartest person in the room ever, um, and I kind of help my students figure that out too, and we go that direction with it to say, we're going to outwork people, we're going to solve problems, we're going to do things a little bit different.
Definitely. So what I'm hearing there is largely, grit is a huge part of it.
Yeah, I think in West Virginia, you see problems that, I mean, living in other places, because I've lived in Minneapolis, Miami, had some experiences with some great universities and great companies in those areas. And one of the things I see is we face different problems here.
Mm.
So problem solving is something you come up with just naturally because of, the way we live in West Virginia and the way kind of we grew up. But it's a great experience. It's made me, somebody who can find success in this field. I won't say I've been truly successful in this field because I don't know what that looks like,
Mm.
but it's also one of those things where you can have success in this field because of those attributes.
I love that. So maybe taking a little bit of a step back, can you explain to all of us what data science really is, and what does it mean for society as a whole? It's a big question, but really appreciate you sharing your expertise on that.
Yeah, so data science is something that's kind of popped up in new terms, but it's an old field, I'll say. To me, it's kind of the mix of math, tech, and problem solving, all to approach problems you can find anywhere, right? So you see data science popping up in social sciences, engineering, computer science, healthcare, in our world, business, right? So it's you can see a lot of these things pop up, but if I had to break it down to like three components, it's tech, math, and problem solving to make an impact. And we've kind of seen that grow, and you see it grow in different areas under different names. You hear ML, you hear applied stats, you hear AI, you hear all the phrases, but it really comes down to how are you solving problems with data and technology.
Absolutely. And so talking about these problems, I think when we talk a lot about data science, we look at it from a much higher level, from almost like a global perspective.
Mhm.
Maybe break it down a little bit and talk about what it means for the local level.
So here in West Virginia specifically, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if I think about here in West Virginia, I mean, we already have a lot of it going on, especially up in North Central West Virginia and the tech corridor we live in, and with some of the great stuff you guys are doing over at Vantage anyway, right? Because we've got a lot of tech companies popping up who are figuring out how to utilize data, how to store information. But even goes down to FBI and the government contractors that are up here, right? We have a huge data infrastructure. I mean, you've got NASA, you've got NOAA, you've got the FBI, you've got all of these people who keep and analyze data. So we've already got that kind of data science tech culture in West Virginia, especially in North Central. Now you get down towards Huntington, you've got Core 10 down there. You've got some of the great things that are happening in Charleston. So we already see data science and the impact around the state. But here's the other piece of this, the remote work aspect that's coming. You have a lot of people who are already working in tech jobs. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday who's in Charleston working for a government contractor in healthcare. And he's running IT systems and data analytics out of his house in Charleston. So there's all these opportunities in West Virginia already, and all the talent here already that is already making an impact. It's always been under a different name. It's been IT systems. It's been, applied statistician, data analyst. What at the end of the day, take the title and throw it away. What are they doing? They're doing the exact same thing we just talked about. They're solving problems using data and technology, right? And at the end of the day, that's what makes it so cool to live here right now. Is this is a growing area. We've had companies like Keylogic, Leidos, Noblest. You've got Bravo up there with you guys, Iconic Air. Like all of these things come in, or all these entities and all these great people come into the area or stay in the area to work in these fields.
No, absolutely. And so, how does that translate then into the work that you're doing across the state of West Virginia? Really, executing on your passion to improve the state.
So it actually makes it a whole lot of fun because you already have a playground here, right?
Yeah.
One of the reasons I got into this field to begin with is there's a Florence Nightingale quote from way back when, and I'll butcher it, but basically it comes down to, using data is a way to work with everybody and work with anybody. And if you take that type of approach with a skill set, it can scale. Because I just named a lot of people who are working on a ton of different problems, right? Bravo's working on something different. Iconic's working on something different. Leidos, Noblest. But then there's also companies like West Banco, which, being headquartered here in the state, they've got a huge data science and data analytics footprint. And, Todd Clausen and Brendan Comfort doing an awesome job up there, hiring and recruiting talent and making sure we retain talent in West Virginia. And one of my goals when I first got here, and it's turned into a group goal with my colleagues, Stefan Collignon, Dr. Collignon, and Dr. Janet Frazier, where we want to work with any company who wants to work with us. We want to work with them. We want to help them grow. We want to help them figure it out. And we put a specific focus right here in West Virginia, right? And so as we keep thinking about how do we grow, it's developing talent pipelines, it's developing innovation pipelines to help the companies that are here and help the companies who want to be here get to where they want to be with this stuff. So having that infrastructure already in place and having some of the people who are already forward thinking in those areas be in West Virginia already, and it's a great base to work off of because you can just keep building. And watching how some of these companies have grown over the past 5-6 years have been awesome.
Absolutely incredible. Absolutely. I do want to take a moment to say, for anyone watching, if you have any questions for Brad, feel free to throw them into the comment section. Let's pivot a little bit then over to let's talk about COVID-19. Naturally, this is a topical thing. We're probably all tired of talking about it, but you've been doing some really interesting work in the realm of COVID-19. Can you share some of the challenges that you've encountered, in response to the COVID crisis, and what your team's done to address those? PPE, vaccine distribution, those types of things.
Yeah, so we'll just start with the story on PPE and go from there, because we've pretty much touched everything we could in COVID now, and I'm like everybody else. I want it to be done and over with, and West Virginia is doing a heck of a job getting to that point. And hopefully we'll continue that direction. But we got a phone call end of March last year. I always joke and tell people I was working on my lawnmower in my garage because I had to tinker. I've got 2 kids. They were running around the house like crazy. Like it was work from home. I was going nuts like everybody else, right? And I got a call from Major Ryan Koss with the West Virginia National Guard saying, hey, we need some help. We need to get a handle on PPE before there's actually shortages in West Virginia. And the one thing I'll say about our state that maybe a lot of people don't know is there's a lot of conversations that go behind closed doors with leadership about being proactive, not getting behind the 8 ball. And I think we've done a really good job in the state with that, not falling behind and being in situations like we've seen other places. But Major Koss called and said, hey, we need some help with this. Can you do it? And my background, again, is, I like to think of it as solving problems with data and technology, right? And if it comes back to that, I've got some training in biostatistics and epidemiology from back when I was at Minnesota. Took some classes in that stuff because they're world renowned for that, and went up there and kind of said, okay, let's piece it together. And we looked at a lot of different things that were coming out. And one of the things we saw is a lot of the models that got some press, right? A lot of the models you heard about in the popular news, whether it be the University of Washington group or some of the other things you saw, weren't really taking into account how rural states worked in healthcare, how far people in West Virginia are willing to travel to get healthcare, right? How far we have to travel to get healthcare. But the other thing is they were looking at how the disease progresses. They weren't looking at how it impacts hospitals. So my colleagues, Darian Drake and Catherine Kopp and I sat down, and it was a lot of late nights, early mornings, phone calls, yelling about code, everything else that anybody who's ever developed goes. But we figured out a way to kind of build in how hospitals work and how people travel in the state to healthcare to come up with facility level forecasts for PPE needs around the state. And what we did was we built, it allowed the National Guard to build a backstop for any hospital in the state. So if anybody ever got short, they had supplies waiting for them, right? So it was a really, really cool project to be a part of and kind of kick off our COVID work. And then that turned into a couple of requests from DHHR about how do we target vaccine, not hesitant populations, but where the vaccines will be most impactful, right? And so I had 5 students work on that from our MSN Buddha program, and they just did a phenomenal job with that. They built data, they developed dashboards, they handed them over to DHHR, and that spawned the next call, which was, hey, we're doing distribution in the state of West Virginia a little different, right? The one thing, if COVID's taught us anything in the state, is we face challenges maybe other places don't, but we also understand the challenges we face as well as anybody. And so we went through a different distribution process than some of the other states did. And it's actually what got us ahead and got us the recognition in the vaccine distribution that we've had, right? Because everybody's heard all the good things that are happening here. And this kind of kicked it off. And so what we wound up doing was going in to work with them to help develop a couple pieces of technology for figuring out what's the demand in the state for the vaccine. Where does it need to be? How do we utilize the JIATF, right? The Joint Interagency Task Force that we've developed in Charleston, right? Because you always hear Dr. Marsh and General Hoyer and the governor talk about the team of teams approach, right? So helping that group be successful, getting ahead of all the things they know that are coming, and making sure we get vaccine in the state to the right places at the right time.
It's such a strong testament to not only data as a tool for business, but data as a method for saving lives, really. And maybe transitioning over back to that business side, from your work on this COVID response here in the state, what opportunities do you see for entrepreneurs to maybe try and start to address some of these challenges that we've seen?
Everything. I mean, and I know that's a generic response, but we've had to be so innovative around this. Like the piece of tech we stood up for vaccine management, I would never teach a student to develop that way. I had the opportunity to work with Catherine and Darianne on that project, and the programming that they did, and the programming especially Catherine did at that level. They're both my former students, and if you would have told them we were going to be developing the way we did, they would have told you I wasn't the one doing it. They told you no way, because this is how I would never teach it. But this rapid response, this adjusting to every little thing that can change in a dynamic environment. Because think where we were last March. We didn't know much to where we're all right now. We're talking about variants. We're talking about vaccination rates. We're talking about, efficacy of vaccines. Like how much has changed in that year. And typically when you're developing software, you're developing in short sprints, but the end game. We've had to develop, not know the end game. And I think there's a lot of opportunities, especially on the tech side, the data side, the unification, getting everything kind of set up, especially to support responses like this. Because, everybody says that I don't think this is going to be the last one we'll see, but it's also, we need to be prepared, because preparedness at the end of the day can get us in front of this stuff. And West Virginia is the use case of that.
Absolutely. And so, talking a little bit about yourself personally, we ask this question of, every guest that we bring on here. And that's how do you accomplish so much? And then how do you also stay focused and productive in your day to day?
That's a tough one for me because
Mm,
I would tell you I'm not as productive as I want to be any day. I always have things I want to get done, and people who work with me will tell you I overshoot um, for myself, and I try not to hold other people to those timelines because I know I'm unreasonable about them. But the one thing I've always tried to figure out, because my mind works about a million miles an hour, and sometimes it actually gets in front of my mouth, so that's where the stutter comes from sometimes. But it's focusing on the problem at hand, solving that one before you think about the next one. And for me, especially in what we've been facing this past year, it's how do you solve the problem in front, and then you worry about the next thing. The phrase we started using in our group that works together is that's a tomorrow problem. Don't even talk about it till tomorrow because that's something we can't deal with right now until we get this thing solved. And I'm not sure that's always a successful strategy, but in this past year, that's been successful for us.
definitely see how it would be extremely important during the past year to kind of know what you need to focus on at what time, and kind of pushing off those things till tomorrow if you need to. We say that university professors and entrepreneurs are kind of like confronted by uh, challenges daily. You stared down this pandemic and kind of had to act decisively, move quickly, naturally, just from that life saving component of it. Can you offer advice to entrepreneurs who may be, learning to uh, deal with that kind of pressure, to deal with immense stress?
Um, I would say again, it goes back to that focus on the problem in front of you, like small, modular, and I learned that from programming because you always build functionality, right? You all like the way I was taught to program, you build functionality, you focus on the small problem, and then you scale it up and you scale it up and you scale it up until it's actually solving what you want, right? And so when we compartmentalize stuff like that, it allowed me to stay focused. And the other piece is, you said it a couple of times, and I try not to think of it that way, though it may be true, is saving lives. Like with what we're doing, I don't try and view it that way because then you can feel the weight of the world on you. And that's the last thing you want because I don't feel like you're as effective or efficient. I mean, anytime we're writing code for this, know what's at stake, especially at the place we are now with vaccine hesitancy and all of those things. We know if something needs to be someplace, that person may have made that appointment and they were unsure and all of those things. So we want to make sure they have the opportunity, right? We want to make sure they have the opportunity to get the shot. We know what's riding on this, but when we're sitting there running down the problem, I can't think about that, or else that just adds another level of stress that it's not productive.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, I'm going to take a moment to kind of pull up some of these audience questions we've been getting. Um, this first one right here is that, has anything surprised you with the data you were tracking for COVID-19?
Has anything surprised me?
Yeah.
So to say I knew what to expect would be a lie. So I'm not even going to pose it that way. Everything's surprising about COVID-19 data because it's the first time we're seeing behaviors like this, right? Like we try and think we understand. We understand what we've seen in the past, but our models and the things we use are only good as a historic perspective, right? And the historic perspectives we have on a global pandemic like this aren't. There's no apples to apples comparison, right? We're learning as we go. That's part of what's been so cool about working on some of the teams I've worked on. And I do want to stress this, and I'd be, I'd be crazy not to. Everything we've done has been a teamwork. There's a team working at West Virginia Clinical and Translational Science Institute with Sally Hoder about looking at testing and vaccination and all those things. And, her, Wes Kimball, Gordon Smith, Miriam, Adam Halas, like all of that entire crew have been doing great work since the beginning of this, right? And you learn as you go. Brian Hendricks, Cassie, like there's just so much good work going on because at the end of the day, a lot of this is scientific process. And it goes back to data science. Data science, a lot of the time, there's a reason we use the term science. You don't know what the answer is going to be, and we're living in this. Go back to your 8th grade science class. Make the hypothesis, test it. You're gonna be wrong. Like, don't assume you're right. And that's something I think data science has actually prepared me for. Is I build predictive models for a living, right? I assume when I'm building a model, I'm wrong already. It's just how can I be less wrong, right? How can I be closer to right? So when you think about worlds and epsilons like that, like when you try not to set expectations for what you're going to see and you try and react.
Absolutely, I love that. And so maybe switching over then, this next question that we have here is kind of around that theme of teamwork that you were talking about. It's that as West Virginia becomes a leader in vaccination response, have you aided any outside entities like neighboring states or government, and shared what you've learned?
Yeah, so early on with the PPE stuff, especially, we had some conversations with different entities. West Virginia is doing this very different than other states.
Yeah.
That's what you have to understand. Where we're trying to run it from a state level, right, to keep that 50,000 foot view, but still make sure we can get to the people, right? Neighboring states have taken different approaches. I won't speak on their level of success because that's not my place. But I'll say I'm really proud of what we've done here. I'm really proud of what the teams have done here, because the way we've set up, it gives a lot of opinions, right? I mean, we saw it. And if anybody's not seen it, the Real Talk last week with Dr. Harris was just phenomenal. But she talked about getting a lot of perspectives when you're attacking a problem like this. And that's what the team of teams approach has allowed us to do in West Virginia, right? So when we start thinking about the perspective, we've got local health departments, we've got K-12, we've got higher ed, we've got hospitals, we've got all of these just groups of very smart people working really hard to solve a problem. So I don't ever say what we do here scales out. Do I think it could? Yes. But I know the stuff we've done here, we've built specific to solve the problem here.
No question.
Now, do I think it'll scale? Yes. But I'm not going to, I'm not going to go crazy on that yet.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, absolutely not. All right. So this last one we have here is focused a little bit on mis and disinformation. Saying this has been a struggle across the country as we deal with some serious social, political, and socioeconomic issues. Are we just adjusting our data accordingly for businesses and governments to account for that and properly respond to misinformation?
So how you respond to misinformation, you put out the right information, you try and say it louder sometimes, right? And you don't want to get in the shouting match because you want your credentials to kind of speak for themselves, right? Because we know where it's coming from. It's part of the reason we're very proud of the numbers we put out every week. We're very careful with the analysis we do. We're very thoughtful. We try and bring a lot of people to the table to comment on it before we put it out, right? So when we're looking at those things, especially with the numbers here in West Virginia, that's something I know we're very careful with. Now, I have a hand in just a small piece of that, but I know the people who are working on the other side of that are also take that approach. So that's something we're very careful with. So yeah, that's kind of my response to that one.
Totally, totally. So this next one here we have, what have you found to be the most difficult part of data janitoring, which we all know is about 80% of the effort?
So yeah, so data wrangling and kind of cleaning it up and making sure it's all there.
Yeah.
So there have been a lot of people who have helped in that process. We've had some. Right now, we have an awesome Catherine and Darianne have an awesome GA, Ryan Midkiff, who he deserves all the credit in the world because he does some data cleaning for us every week to get those PPE forecasts out. He's a big part of what we do. And then you've got all these other people who are collecting data. I mean, the thing you've got to understand here is, and again, it goes back to the team of teams approach in West Virginia, right? You've got data from all these different sources that never really talk to each other. In non-pandemic times, this data wasn't really connected. You bring all these people to this table and you have the conversation, and data starts getting shared, and we're able to do things we never were able to do before. So yeah, we've got to clean some data. Yeah, we've got to think about those things. But what people understand is how hard that part is, and they give you as much help as they can. So yeah, it's very much 80% getting it clean and everything like that, and it continues to need cleaned. Sure. Because as we continue to evolve, right, things are changing. So we're seeing new use cases. We're seeing people using things that we didn't expect in a way we didn't expect, right? Yeah. So you just kind of move with it. So you just assume if you're going to work in this world, you're going to spend time cleaning data and getting to know your data. Sure. But it's not. I think cleaning data is a bad term sometimes because it's more data exploration. Because when we're quote unquote cleaning data, what we're doing is we're figuring out what all's in there. Why does it react like this? Especially in systems, how do users input things? How can you make things talk to each other that never talk, right? So it's thinking about those type of things. So that 80-20 rule still applies, and it applies anytime. But it's very much in this case, it's an informative process because again, there's no playbook for this.
Absolutely. So I think that rounds out our audience questions. I want to obviously say thank you for your time. My last question, and this is one that we obviously ask of all our guests, is what are your personal hopes and what's next for you? What's the next big challenge?
Hopefully tenure. I mean, that I'm an assistant professor, so tenure would be nice. I'm not gonna lie about that.
Absolutely.
But no, for us, it's making sure we continue to support the state. I'm really having some fun with my research right now, which is machine learning methods and those type of things. But one of the things this has done for me, the pandemic, if there was a victory in it for me personally, it was I got to know a lot of really good scientists around here and a lot of awesome groups who are doing really innovative things. So I'd like to continue working with them. One of the things I'm really excited about is actually with the guys who've taught me everything I know about anything about supply chain. I had zero supply chain background before I came to WVU, and Dr. John Saldana in the supply chain department or global supply chain management group here kind of took me under his wing, mentored me. We've worked on a bunch of projects together. So he's also been somebody who's in the background of this, doing a lot of like mentoring with me and talking me through stuff. And I can't thank him enough. And our co-author Doug Thomas, who's at Dr. Doug Thomas, who's over at UVA, who's been helping us or who's helped me think through some things as well. It's working with them continuously on the stuff we're doing now. We're actually working on a playbook for supply chain for pandemics. So what's that look like? What you should be prepared for, things like that. So there's a lot of cool stuff coming out of this, and it's more of making sure we get the right information at the end of the day. And one of the things we don't do is we don't rush it. We want to see it like we want to make sure we're very cautious about how it's published, what it says, and what it means, because I think that's what gives you credibility in the long run.
Absolutely, I love that. Talking about preparedness and being ready for the next challenge when it does come up. That's very important. Well, once again, I want to say thank you, Dr. Price, for taking the time to join us. Where can people find you? Website, social media, that type of thing?
So yeah, I've got my website. It's www.bradprice.io. You can get my email and everything like that. If you just search for me on Google, I typically come up in the first couple hits. Just search Brad Price, West Virginia, and it'll typically be there.